440, 160,000 words and 440 pages. They start giving the boundaries. That's okay, you know.
Right, right.
And you know what you got to deal with, you know.
Well, we got 90 minutes,
Right.
which in PBS is a real 90 minutes. It's not a, you know.
Serious, man.
It's
That's right. Nobody jumping in and
no
out
commercial.
with cockroach killers, yeah.
No 5 acts.
Yes.
One big symphony.
Yeah, it's beautiful. This A&E, God bless them, is sloppy. Woo, my God, man.
All right, we're rolling. So,
All right.
again, these first few ones, we don't need big stories. We'll just try and, you know,
Okay.
nail these little things. There's a picture upstairs about your first band gig. I think your half-brothers standing in the back. Tell us about the first band gig you did, just very quickly.
My first job, professional job, 1947, at the Madison Avenue Y, and we had 4 horns, and with Charlie Taylor, who started the band, myself, Eddie Beard, and Oscar Holden, his sister, Grace Holden, and my brother Wayman on drums. Now, Wayman was not born to be a drummer. You know, he wanted to play drums, but he was not born to be a drummer, because Wayman, in the history of jazz, nobody has ever stopped in the middle of a tune. And Wayman would chew gum when he played drums, and we're playing Choo Choo Boogie with Louis Jordan, and all of a sudden, man, Choo Choo Boogie, pop, stops. Looking back, Wayman's like that. So what's wrong? So I'm tired. Please, man. Wayman's beautiful. I adore him, man.
Perfect. You good, Nardi? Everything good back there? Great.
Great.
Okay, so you're with this band. You've done some stuff at school. And then, you know, how did you get pulled into Bumps Blackwell's band? Just very briefly, that transition. You've been doing some stuff on your own, but then.
Bumps Blackwell was like a legend in Seattle. He, you know, you couldn't get away from him. He ran a butcher shop on Madison Avenue under the Washington Educational Social Club. He had a chain of taxi cabs. He worked in a jewelry store. He had a job at Boeing, and he had a junior and a senior band. So we heard about the senior band. He was like he owned the turf. And so he saw Charlie Taylor's band and sort of drafted that into being Bumps Blackwell's junior band. And before we know it, we look up, we're opening for Cab Calloway, because we could do everything, dance, sing, play together, comedy, anything, at 13 years old. And we'd open for Cab Calloway. Bobby Tucker comes through. We work with Billie Holiday. Comes back through with Billy Eckstine. We work with Billy Eckstine. So we felt we were hot stuff, you know. And Ray Charles was in town. And it was wonderful, because we were just pumped up all the time. We had 3 jobs a night, you know. And it was great. For kids, it's a miracle.
Perfect. You
Michael,
good?
our Inky is just dipping into frame. Neil, would you just raise the diffusion?
Sure.
Raise
2
what?
seconds.
Okay.
The back light, the gel on the back
Okay.
light is sneaking into the picture, so we're just going to fix that and then
Okay.
push on. I'm going to grab that copy of Kingfish and ask you about that. Good?
Yeah, that's good. Good, thanks.
How's the eye line, Nardi? I really don't want to learn.
You can move a
later.
little bit more this way.
Okay. Tell me when I'm in, and then I'll just cue the line.
You can come in a little bit more. A little bit more.
Yeah. You know, I'm sure there's moments in your recording sessions where you, as the producer, just want to be, you know, somewhere else or whatever. The moment of the tweaking of everything here, where like I'm the horse at the starting gate. I want to get everything on film, and everyone's saying, look, before we record, you know, Brothers Johnson or whatever, let me fix this mic, or let me that.
Michael, I swear I am right in your radar zone. I feel exactly where you are.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
I have since day one, you know, and I love that kind of communication. I feel
You
it.
good?
Great.
Okay. Tell me, am I in?
You are now.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
So just tell me, this is I'm going to hand this to you for your first song. Tell me, how do you know, there's your young guy, you're trying to retain the right to your song. What do you do? What is that?
Well, this was the first professional thing I ever had recorded, and I was so proud, and I was levitating. It's called Kingfish, and I wrote the arrangement, I wrote the tune, and I did probably one of my only solos on records, the first thing I recorded with Lionel Hampton. I didn't have much money, so somebody told me the way you copyright it is put it in an envelope and seal it and put not to be opened for copyright, so they stamp it on the back. They put the stamps on the back, and that will hold up in court. And so that, thank God, somebody, again, showed you the way. And showed you how to protect your music. And I was thrilled when we did this. This is 1951.
Great. Thank you. Four Winds was a composition that took you a lot of places, didn't it? Got you into Hamp's band and Schillinger. Just, again, very briefly set up, where did that idea musically come out of? And then reiterate, it took you to, you showed it to Hamp and Schillinger.
They say God protects fools and babies, right? I was so stupid when I was at this age, but I had so much passion for music. I didn't know what key signatures were. I hadn't studied formally. And so I'd write on notes at the top of the parts, play B natural a half step lower because it sounds funny if you play it natural. And the guy said, just put a flat down and it's in the key of F, turkey. And I was trying to describe the western winds and the northern winds and the southern winds and the different characteristics of it. Because I always wanted to write for movies first, so I always thought visually. And eventually I went for it, wrote it. We played it at Seattle University with Gus Manhertz Orchestra. And I showed it to Lionel Hampton, and that helped get me out of Seattle. And I showed, well, before that, I just sent it to Boston, which is called the Schillinger House, which is now Berklee School of Music. And that got me to the East Coast, closer to Charlie Parker and Bird. and Miles.
Great. Perfect. You said something the other day in Washington we didn't get in an interview, which is that you and your brother would see these movies on the weekend, and you'd pay whatever it was, a nickel or something, but you'd think about it, you'd hear the movie. Tell us about that.
Well, we used to play hooky from school every day of the week sometimes, to go down to pay 11 cents to go see these movies. And I was more interested in, because I don't know where this fascination for visual and sound came from, but I could feel the influences of all the studios after a while, after listening to so many with Alfred Newman at Fox and Victor Young at the Paramount, et cetera, and Benny Carter whenever he did something, and Horace Henderson with Lena Horne. And but after a while, I didn't think it was ever going to be possible for me to get an opportunity to write for films, because they were long, four-syllable Eastern European names most of the time, and not too many Joneses or Johnsons on there. So finally, I got a shot when I was 30. Great.
Now, a great joke, which I've heard you tell at Basie and Beyond and somewhere else, was about a Yiddish word that's used. What is that? Tell me about that. When you get out to Hollywood.
Well, it was a word I hadn't heard before, and so for a minute I said, possibly it could mean, here comes the composer, because out here comes the Schwarzer. The Schwarzer, which is, it's a Yiddish word for the N-word. And it didn't take me long to figure that out, though. So it didn't last too long.
Great. The first time you go to Europe, there's this amazing picture of you on about to go on the plane with Lionel Hampton. What was the feeling about going to Europe before you get to Sweden? Was that sort of making it, or what did it mean to you to leave New York?
It meant, at that age, freedom and entry level to the most beautiful dreams imaginable, because I didn't know what it was, but I could imagine from things I had heard about Paris, and I had no idea what to expect in Scandinavia. And in school, they talked about French. I said, I don't ever need French. I'm up here in Washington in the Northwest. And so when we got there, it took 27 hours to get there, and then there were prop planes. And it was like walking on another planet. I couldn't believe what was happening there. Musically, the girls, everything. It was just the people were so different. And somehow it gave me an opportunity to look at my past, present, and future without the weight of always having to think about black and white. Another important thing that was going on is the Danes were fighting with the Swedes were fighting with the Finns, the Cypriots with the Greeks, the Armenians with the Turks. So it let me know that there are conflicts of all kinds around the world, and it opened up the lens, so to speak.
Great. Nardi,
Myself and George Cooper and Clifford Solomon looking out of the train window as we're coming into the Swedish railroad depot. You ever see that?
yeah.
And I'm telling you, I could see it right then. And we said, what the hell? We came from Oslo, said, what the hell is this? And on a baggage cart were all these great musicians playing their buns off. I mean, I could not believe what I heard come out of there. Bing Thalberg on accordion. It was just awesome. Simon Brim's band.
Wow. Yeah, last in Basie and Beyond, I cheated that for Paris because it's such an amazing photo.
Yeah.
And you have that story of
That's true.
coming into Paris, but maybe
That's okay. It was the same thing.
Yeah.
Only my eyes were big in Paris.
Okay, good, Nardi.
Great.
Okay, so just set up. You snuck in. You're doing this session. It's Clifford Brown, Art Farmer, and some Swedish all-stars. Give us the lineup. Who were there, and what was it like to create your first? That's your first recording, right? I mean, you've done other
on the
recordings.
record date.
Yeah, the Swedish all stars.
No, that's not our first recording.
No, but then why is that date important in your career?
That date is important because that's the contact of the hands across the ocean thing, of the contact with people that could barely speak each other's languages, and they walk into the studio, and it's like everybody's known and loved each other for years and years and years. I mean, it was instantaneous. You could smell the respect and love on both sides, and that is one fortunate thing. I mean, with my background as a child, was very important that kind of communication and bonding was always very important to me, and it's happened all over the world. You know, it's so amazing. I mean, it's not about difference in nationalities. It's like there's good, bad people in every country in the world, dumb, smart, cheap, generous, and that's what you learn. And you have a friend here in Stockholm, one in London, one in Paris, and Tatsu Nagashima in Japan, and it's really the same kind of a buddy, because they like the same music, like kind of girls, the same kind of food, common interests, like anything else, and it smashed the barrier that would be like a nationalistic barrier. It just flattened that right to the ground. Yugoslavia, the same thing.
So who are those Swedish all-stars?
The Swedish all-stars on the baggage cart were Simon Brim, who's the leader on bass. Bengt Thalberg was on accordion, one of the best piano players in the world. He played with Miles and Stan Getz. Arne Darneris was on alto sax. Jack Noreen was on drums. Who's that? Who's it? Gunnar Jonsson was on bass. And Lars Gullin on baritone sax, and Clifford Brown and Art Farmer, two of my favorite trumpet players. I mean, major trumpet players. And it was a night that was just, my favorite expression is when God walks through the room. Because God definitely walked through the room that night. And it was just, it's etched in your soul forever, something like that.
I got that coming up, but let's grab that now.
Michael, one more inch to the left, too.
Good?
Good.
When you go into the studio, you have that favorite expression. Set that up for me. Whenever you go into the studio, there's that sense of divinity, right?
One of the reasons over all these years that I've always resisted having a studio, home recording studio, is to me the studio is a sacred place. It really is. And if I could get up in the middle of the night in my shorts and go record something, it would take that feeling away. But we have always told the musicians, and I've felt that from the bottom of my soul, that let's leave some space to let God walk through the room, because that's when the real serious things happen, and it's the divine intervention, and it's the divinity is really what it's about, cause and manifestation. As cause is God's job, and so once you have delineated the lines of responsibility, some beautiful things can happen, and that the footprints that God leaves in the studio is you can always hear it on the tape.
Thank you.
Okay, Michael, I'm sorry. A little bit more to your right. Just your shoulder.
Okay.
But maybe I should come over.
No, you're perfect. First time you hit Paris, Just describe the scene. Like, you get out of that train, and I once heard you say it was smoking.
Yes.
Describe Paris. Set us there.
Well, when I got to Paris, I didn't get out of the train. I levitated. We were coming from Switzerland. I just bought an overcoat in Sweden and a Tyrolean hat like all the guys in the band. And I started to feel my heart pound, but in a very beautiful way. And butterflies, all that stuff. And I just got up, and I was in the back of the train, just kind of feeling the groove, because I knew that it was just the beginning of dawn. And when we pulled into the train station at Palais d'Orsay, which is a museum now, at that time it was a train station and a hotel. And I saw the silhouette, the crimson silhouette of Paris and the Eiffel Tower and everything you've ever heard about. It was the most one of the moments that, it's like a surrealistic dream. It really was. Had no way of knowing what to expect. And it was very shortly after the war. So all of the evidence of the war, you could tell you were in a country that had been doing everything 2,200 years longer than we've been doing it. You could instantly you were sure that was, you could feel that.
Thank you. Duke Ellington said, "Music is my mistress." What is music to you?
My mother. It is. Unfortunately, with our background, we had, my brother reacted to the circumstances of our background, and a lot of people, authorities have said that that's what took him out, is not knowing how to deal with what the circumstances were. And he asked me why I asked why it didn't happen to me. The same thing didn't happen to me because I really, really loved my brother. I would have given half of my body to him. And he said, you found some way as a survival tactic to totally transplant all of your need for what that deficiency was into something else, which is music and imagination. And you can't forget the impact that radio had on us versus TV, because radio stimulates an environment where you can put anything in it you want. Now, I used to make the Green Hornet black man, and Shadow was black, and everything else, because on radio, the only black people were Beulah, Rochester, who sometimes would get in Jack Benny's face, but he was funny, and Amos and Andy were white. So there were no books in the Northwest about black people. It was See Jane Run or Spot or whatever it was. And maybe once or twice every 2 years, Booker T. Washington, a couple of sentences, George Washington Carver. But that was it. So you have no place to grab your identity. And the big bands, when the bands came through, I found out where I wanted to live the rest of my life.
Thank you. Very briefly, we had the sense in our last interview that, your mother was really not with you, and that I think it's this story where with the Joe Louis gloves, your father meets this woman. Describe your stepmother and really how she favored her own kids, and just in very brief and broad terms, your relationship with her. That was not a good relationship, was it?
Well, it was not so much that she favored her own kids, really. It was just, I think, when I think back of it now, because you look back with forgiveness now and much more mature understanding of what was really going on. She was probably doing the best she could. She doesn't know any better, She didn't have much of an education, and she responded emotionally to a very, very huge responsibility, which is taking care of 7 or 8 kids during that time. And she the only way she probably could do it was crack the whip. And we all laugh at each other now, the survivors of the Holocaust of the 410 22nd Avenue. That's how we refer, my brothers and sisters refer to each other. And she was tough. She was very tough. She was, I wasn't able to go in my own refrigerator until I was 23 years old. Psychologically, I was never allowed at home. I was that to establish that fear, and that takes a lot of brainwashing. And my brother and I both had a hard time opening our own refrigerators when we lived in our own apartments or whatever. And her kids too. I mean, they were. There's times when Wayman and I used to sit in there, saying, "How do we get out of this? How do we do her in?" A lot of crazy stuff. It was very, very powerful emotions. She was tough.
Just if you would just set up, my father married a woman named, and give us her name as a topic sentence.
Well,
I don't know. No, you say it. I don't know.
Okay, I was going to say, how all this started was my father was a friend of and worked for Joe Louis, and after a fight, he gave him some boxing gloves after he won the fight in, and I took the boxing gloves. I was a little kid, and I wanted a BB gun from a friend of mine down the street, 3 doors down the street, and so I gave him Joe Louis's boxing gloves for the BB gun. My father came home, and he wore my butt out first, because Lloyd told him, he said, "Daddy, Dewey got a pistol." And he went down the street, and he came back, not with the pistol, but my friend's mother, and that was Elvira. And he married her, and that's how all that happened.
So her name was pronounced Elvira?
Elvira, Elvera. And when she'd kick our butt, she'd speak Spanish. She'd get on you, and she had some pretty heavy hips. She would impinge you to the floor, and you could not move. So, oh God.
Wow. My mother used to. It's funny how this stuff you realize later. My mother used to take a ruler. She'd hit us with a ruler.
Oh, yeah.
And I got to a certain point where once I held in my arm and the ruler broke, and that was it.
Really?
No more ruler.
Well, and my grandmother, she'd send you out. She'd say, "Wanna?" She was African, So she'd say, "Wanna go get the switch? Wanna go get a switch?" That means you have to go out in the backyard and pull off a pussy willow branch. And I was hoping she'd hit me with the pussy willow on it, because that would at least cushion some of the blows. So no. She'd say, and strip all the pussy willows off so they had some nice little points there that could bite into your booty. Oh, man, that old school was a trip, It was, and you know what? There's some aspects of old school that we could probably use now, to tell you the truth. There's a little bit too much freedom going on now, and I think it's resulted in a lot of disrespectful attitudes, which I think we could split the difference on.
Very briefly, because it's incredibly complicated.
Okay.
But starting maybe with your grandmother, give me a sense of your family tree. If you could trace it, just say, maybe let's just start after roots. You got interested in your family genealogy. And what I'm particularly interested in is that, which you once told me, is that it's your grandmother she's the offspring of a plantation owner and a slave, right? That's one thing. Then there's the whole French court side.
Right. The musical base.
So again,
okay, I'll try.
As briefly as you can.
I'll try.
We'll use the chart, but
okay. The best part about one of the great pleasures of having have shared Alex Haley as my brother, very close friend, was Alex asked me a question one day, and he said, "Where did the music come from in your family?" I couldn't answer it because I wasn't aware of anybody in my family that ever played music. My mother played a little church piano, hymnal piano. And Alex went to Salt Lake City to a lady named Johnny Cerny, a Mormon, and I discovered that that's their religion. And he said if he had used she has a company called Lineages Incorporated, he could have saved 10 years on roots. And he says, "I'm going to find out where your musical heritage came from." Make a long story short, the report comes back, and we find out that we're from a plantation, gumwood plantation in Bovina, Mississippi, which is owned by James Lanier, related to Sidney Lanier, and with direct bloodstream from George Washington. And they ran the whole thing down. I couldn't believe it, and it took it eventually all the way back to Edward I's Longshanks. And on the way, we ran into Nicholas Lanier and 14 court musicians that were Huguenots that came from England to France, and that may have been that special kind of strange feeling I had when I saw Paris, and tied it together. And he was, in fact, I have a painting that of Nicholas Lanier that was painted by Van Dyck, and it's just a long, amazing history. But the way they did it, they found my grandmother's night slips when she'd sign in in the night work, do night work in Kentucky and down in Carolinas, and they found everything, all of the Chicago Defender articles about my father fighting discrimination as a carpenter in the 30s and 20s and so forth. Amazing experience, and there were 14. In fact, Jane Fonda is a cousin too. She found the same thing on her side. It's all hooked up together one way or another, but most of the time you don't know. The black side is very difficult to trace accurately, but they did send, they had census reports, they had weather reports. They have amazing devices to dig into your history. I was just absolutely startled.
Yeah. Touch up of the makeup? How are you doing? It's okay, but I think you were asleep in 1956, and I'm like, oh, that's on the tour. I want, that's
on my stomach, right?
Yeah, on your stomach.
Because I have apnea, sleep apnea. I didn't find out till 6 years ago. And as a kid, I only could really sleep when I was on my stomach. Wow. Oh man.
But that you have this responsibility to share that stuff, because there's a lot to learn and. A lot to learn in there. Everybody ready?
Great.
Onward. Give me a topic sentence for this, if you would. What was your nickname at Mercury Records? Just start with my nickname. It was
I don't remember.
Budget.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Probably the nickname behind my back was Budget Buster. Well, the two musical guys, there was a Hal Mooney there, too, who was an arranger and an executive, too, A&R man. And we do all of the very musical things, Hal was doing Dinah Washington and Sarah Vaughan, et cetera, and we were kind of sharing those. And I had Nina Simone and all those other things. And they call us Budget Busters because we use big orchestras, much bigger than what the pop hits were. And they sold maybe 1/10. I remember when I first went to Mercury, I said, well, what do you guys consider a jazz record? They said anything that sells under 20,000 records is jazz. And if it's over 20, it's not jazz anymore.
Great. Now, after busting the budget for a while, there must have been some sort of pressure to create, some sort of hit. Give us a sense of that, and how. Just again, very quickly, I know it's tied in with a trip to Japan and everything. How did this "It's My Party" thing emerge?
Well, I'd been challenged on several fronts, with the other A&R guys, subliminally. Nobody ever came out and said, "Man, get up off your butt," and let's contribute to the bottom line. But you just kind of sense it, because I'm doing albums like French Horns for My Lady with Julius Watkins, which probably sold about 111 records. And so Irving mentioned to me very subtly a couple of times. And so we were at an A&R meeting in Chicago, and Irving has a cassette. And we'd go through all kinds of business and status reports and all those meetings at the Oxford Hotel in Chicago. And he said, here's this tape. All you guys have to do is say you heard it, because Joe Glazer gave it to me, and Howie, his friend who's a fight promoter, is the uncle of Leslie Gore, And you have to just say, I want to tell him that I presented it to you guys. So they threw it down to the other end of the room and played it. And the guys were throwing it back, and I caught it on the way. I caught the cassette and said, I love the sound. It was a very original sound, and she was in tune. And at that time, they weren't, not a lot of singers were singing in tune then. I mean, that was part of the style, was not singing tune. And so we went and found this song through some publishers, and Klaus Ogerman asked Klaus Ogerman to arrange and conduct the session, and we went into Bell Sound on a Saturday afternoon, and we cut two sides: a B side that was written by Paul Anka, Danny, and it's my party, and felt very good about it. You know, it's the first time I'd done pop records before, like a whole lot of shaking going on with Big Maybelle and Laverne Baker and things, but this was, I mean, really aiming for a pure pop market, because you have to remember that it was brand new at that time, the kids singing rock and roll for pop. And then I went to Japan. I didn't think I liked her last name. I learned a lot about that, too. So we'll change the name when I get back from Japan. I was going over there to score a film and act in it with Tony George. And I got a call, and they said, anybody call you yet? I said, no. I said, how do we do it with Leslie's name? They said, her record's #1. You still care what her name is? Get your butt home and let's do an album. And from there on in, I think Leslie must have had 18 hits in a row. Even up until with the invasion of the Beatles, You Don't Own Me was #2. And we were mumbling around about...
Yes.
Perfect. Let's turn to Frank Sinatra briefly. What made Sinatra great?
I think what made Frank Sinatra so great is the same thing that made people like Ella Fitzgerald and Billy Eckstine, Sarah Vaughan, and Peggy Lee great. It's very difficult for the audience today to realize that the Bassies, the Artie Shaws, the Benny Goodmans, and Duke Ellingtons, and Lunsfords, and Tommy Darcy's were the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and Boyz II Men and the Temptations of that time. The instrumentalists were the stars, you know, and the vocal groups were the relief. And Tommy Darcy's band, he'd play as long as he wanted to, and Ziggy Elman and Buddy Rich and whoever was in the band at that time, and then they'd modulate, and Frank Sinatra, Joe Stafford, and the Pied Pipers would walk down to the microphone after modulation and sing a song and sit back down. What made them great is they did not have the pressure on them to be amazing performer, amazing singer, and everything else because they had a wonderful spawning ground there to sit there every night and learn, listen to the best jazz musicians in the world, and Basie or Duke's band, and watch Tommy Darcy breathe, and I'm Getting Sentimental Over You. Frank swears, you know, he learned how to breathe and hold notes like he does because they had the proper apprenticeship time and development and a spawning ground, a place to use as a spawning ground, which they don't have now. A kid at 15 years old walks into a studio and gets the #1 record. She's got a publicist, an agent, a manager, pygmy stretches, got everything all at one time, and $14 million worth of jobs, too. And has to learn how to do everything that it takes somebody else 25 years to develop, piece by piece. They have to get it all together. Imagine the pressure on Britney Spears. How many people are there fixing her hair and her makeup and her microphone and the stage and choreographers and everything else? They get her prepared after 1 or 2 hits to get out on that stage and hold that spotlight. It's not easy. And also, let's get down to the other thing. So the people from the era of Sinatra were singing the best music ever written in America. Please, let's get real. They sang the best songs ever written in this country in terms of American popular music. And I know that's subjective and a matter of opinion, but I mean, when you get down to just music, there's not too much to discuss what's really musical and creative lyrically and melodically. And you must admit that the songs of the 40s and so forth were some of the most powerful things ever written in pop music, and most of them from Broadway shows. And they had the best material, they had great arrangers and very musical bands because when looking back, all those bands were really dance bands. Basie, Duke, and Artie Shaw, Woody Herman, everything, they were dance bands first to shake your booty. Now, in the course of that, with imagination in a group of 18 or 19 musicians, there's a great arranger, there's a great leader, and there's great soloists in there, and a lot of innovation and art came through in spite of it just being a dance situation. And classical art came through that. And it was like Salk vaccine in a way. And it came out, and it's something that captured the entire planet very early. I have a friend in Sweden, Harry Nicolason, who was the owner and founder of Jazz Orchestra Journalen, which is an 80-year-old jazz magazine from Sweden. And it's it's ironic that the entire world discovered this art from America, and the Americans to this day, most of them have not really yet understood what place they play in the world of art around the world, American music.
Amen. What about working? You know, there's the documentary you made in I guess in the mid '80s, working with Frank, and you see you guys huddling together, sort of, you know, really talking code with each other quietly away from everybody else. Speak to how you worked with Frank. It wasn't like a big public, okay, this is what we're doing, but very personal, wasn't it?
The communication between Frank was very personal. I think the key to that communication was there's two different environments. There's when he and I are in the dressing room, and maybe Jilly and George Jacobs or somebody. That's one situation. The other situation is where there's managers and musicians and people running around doing things. So it becomes very clear right away that the way to effectively communicate with Frank is suggested to him privately rather than telling him publicly, because you force him, you know, to have to defend his position and his reputation as, you know, as being a bigger than life legend when you force a confrontation in public like that. I don't think it's very intelligent to do. And a good case in point would be when we opened in Vegas with Basie the first time. It's the Sands Hotel. And Frank did something that was I'd never seen anybody do before, which I really love, because I worked with lots of singers, and they take a legal pad or whatever, and they write 1, 2, 14 and fill in the tunes they order the tunes for the show, and then they maybe put the 12 and they'd say false bows and do a playoff like they're going to leave, and then come back and do 2 more encores. I mean, that's show business. That's the way it works. Frank used. And if you change your mind, you have to rewrite all those things or cross this out and put it down, and it's very cumbersome. Frank would come in with 3x5 cards, and I love that. It sounds simple, but 3x5 cards with each individual song on it, so you just shuffle them around just like that. It was so simple, and you could really go after a real good tune stack, you know, in a show. And just before we ended the rehearsal, as we ended the rehearsal, he get me to the Chicago. This is my kind of town at the beginning of the show, and fly me to the moon at the end. I just written arrangements, you know, and I had adapted Nelson Riddle's arrangement on My Kind of Town we didn't have strings with Basie. So when we got to the dressing room, I knew the energy of those two things, and I knew it was backwards. And I said, Francis, I think if we tried just the reverse of that, it's more stark a beginning on Fly Me to the Moon, and really powerhouse flag waver closer on My Kind of Town. Let's try it like that way the first show. Cool, no problem. Never was, you know. It was amazing respect. But he would, if he gets cornered in front of a crowd, you know, he bites. It's like stepping on his tail when they bite, you know. And I've seen him take people out, or a lot of artists, you know. We were talking about Ray Charles, please. That's my love, you know. But Ray Charles would drown a glass of water if you bite his tail, if you step on his tail.
Now, when you first got to Vegas, it wasn't, you know, Vegas wasn't very hospitable to black musicians, was it?
Oh, that's such funny. Hospitable, that word never came up.
But Frank sort of wanted to tell us what Frank did to sort of give you guys the ability to just exist in the town.
Well, I'd been on the road for years with Lionel Hampton. I'm coming out of Seattle, and I got a lot of surprises in the South, but, you know, with colored drinking fountains, and that's what they say, colored and white. And the dance halls were all segregated in New Orleans, Mississippi, Georgia, and everywhere. And we're in the 60s now, 64. And so first night we get there, Frank has this big huddle over near some slot machines. I remember Keely Smith and her brother Piggy were there. And I see a bunch of very rough-looking dudes standing around. He says, here's how it's going to work. Each one of you guys are going to be assigned to a different guy in the band. And if anybody even looks funny at them, break their legs. I mean, Frank used that word very loosely. And I had a Yugoslavian dude. It was, you know, in his late 60s with a bald head that could actually break a brick, you know, probably with his hands. He taught me to speak Serbo-Croatian, and I didn't realize it was that rough up there then. And they'd just come out of a situation where, you know, the biggest artists up there, whether it be Nat Cole or Lena or anybody else, they had to eat in the kitchen. They could not even go into the casino. Sammy Davis couldn't go into the casino when he first worked there. That's the way it was. And I remember once with the Four Tops were working with Sammy, and they weren't allowed to go in the pool, and somebody made a crack about, what are you talking about? It's going to be a ring around the pool or something. But it was racist. There's no two ways about it. And it's that's the way it was.
How did you get, and Nardi, this is what I was mentioning before, I'd love to focus on your ring, if you would. How did you come by Frank's ring, and what does it mean to you?
Hold on 1 second.
Okay, we're just going to tweak your
Tweak
makeup.
my do?
No, his hands are a little dry.
Tweak my do?
No, they're going to close up on your hand, and it was a little dry earlier.
You're trying to call me Ashy Arthur?
You are ashy.
Ashy
And
Arthur.
write your name on your skin. Okay, do both of them together.
The Greasy Arthur.
Quincy, your book has so much great stuff, but one of my favorites is the scene of how you got ready for a gig and all the different ointments and the rag do. I just love that.
Yes, the do-rag, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's true, man. I mean, that was a serious attention to the do.
Yeah.
I see it in my yearbook. I've got all the waves going there.
All right, let's go back to the ring and how it came to you and what it means.
It's this is a ring that's it's the family ring of the Sinatra family. This is the ring that Frank Sinatra wore, almost everything he sang. And Tina gave us all rings with this family seal on it. The people that were really close to the family. It means a lot to me. Frank was amazing. We had a bonded in an amazing way. I never took it. Unfortunately, I never knew how real and deep it was until he was gone, because I didn't want to take the chance of being too vulnerable enough to get hurt if that was the way he acted with everybody. You know what I mean? And so, but he really reached out. He asked me to go to the family dinners on Thanksgiving and Christmas, and we spent a lot of time together. Had really hang in Palm Springs, and just incredible working and playing relationship. And it's either one is 100% experience playing with him and working with him, but working and playing with him is awesome. And I'm glad I did both.
Great.
Quincy, would you take your glasses and just push them back? Great.
There we go. I was just hoping, rather than having me write a little bit about these most significant people in your life, but if you could speak to, again, very briefly, a line, 2 lines, Jerry, and then Ula and Peggy. What describe your relationship to them? And
Ooh, boy.
I know, but it's
Woo!
it's just so much better from you
No,
than to have me say you.
I don't mind you doing that one.
Okay, all right, I'll do it.
Huh? Wait a minute. Let me think about that. Because you just hit the whole
I know.
gumbo of things there.
I knew it's a big thing,
Oh, Jesus.
but it's just these are people who are
Okay, I mean, listen, come on.
Jerry
They
used
gave me my kids, you know.
Jerry used to take the copy things across
She did
town.
everything. Jerry did everything. Jerry did not deserve me, believe me. Jerry was a fantastic woman. I've always respected her and have a very warm, deep feeling for her. She's the mother of my most beautiful child. And because I have 7 incredible children, and I did not know how to be a father at the time. And she was there all the time. She was the very beginning, my first love, you know, in high school. And we went through a lot together. A lot of rough stuff and a lot of the joyful stuff, because we had a good attitude about it. And I guess we just grew in different directions, and that's hard. And that probably comes from getting married too young and not knowing who you are. You know, I was still trying to find out who I was in the parties, you know. Please. And she's a good lady. Beautiful lady.
And so your next relationship began in the early 60s, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not in L.A. It was in New York where you met Ula.
Right. I met Ula in Forest Hills when Sinatra asked me to join him. After we finished the concert, we were working there with at the Forest Hills. What's they call it? Stadium? Yeah. And they said there was a TWA party afterwards. We had been partying so hard on the road, you know. I said, Francis, you know, you're wearing me out, man. We're just coming from Detroit, you know, bunnies and, you know, tearing it up, bro. And there's two single guys. And he said, let's walk through 15 minutes and we'll be out of there. I said, okay. And as we walk through, I see this lady with this Gucci, not a Pucci dress, which were pretty high in those days, but they made up for it because they had high Courage, white Courage boots, you know, and you could tell that she was obviously a model. She was a Ford model, beautiful, long eyelashes, and she was just 19 years old, and she was with her mother and her brother, and we hung out that day, and it's the funniest thing happened. We went by her apartment with Phil Ramone and Irving Green and with her family, and went by her apartment on Park Avenue. And after she took me we were talking and everything else, so she took me swimming at some building down near Basin Street East. And I guess she wanted me to let me know that she was an expert swimmer. She taught the Olympic team in Sweden, you know. She coached them. And I said, what the hell am I doing up here with no sleep, you know, in a swimming pool, you know, like at 8 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was. And what happened was I had been running all over the world and had a lot of relationships. And at one point, I, in a way, kind of got short-circuited because it was hard for me to identify the emotions connected with one person. You know, it was just a lot of beautiful, fantastic women that I just happened to run into in 6 different countries in the world, and it scared me because it didn't feel normal, you know, to live like that. And I've always appreciated having a good time. Don't get me wrong. But I said to myself, well, maybe I should go back to try to make it work with Jerry, you know, and so forth. But I admit that I had a lot of issues with dealing with how do you deal with a significant other, you know, and if you don't really understand what mother is, it's hard to understand what that is too. And I don't want to get too Freudian about this, but I said, okay, this is not the way to go, and so I was presumptuous enough and arrogant enough to say, okay, I'm gonna settle down with Ula, and everything's gonna be okay, and all my sins will be redeemed and everything. And that is pretty presumptuous and arrogant. And it didn't work out that way because she had her own damaging. She was damaged herself, you know. Her father had left her mother when she was 5 years old, almost a similar situation. And later on, with much work and therapy and so forth, later on, I understood that I was always looking for, my inner child was looking for that little girl inner child who was just as messed up as he was, you know, and he did a pretty good job, you know. And they'd find each other, and it was really those two playing with, they were playing out the whole role. And so it was, you know, it was short-lived, and your differences seem to be exaggerated when it's on that basis, because it's still not coming in the radar zone the right way. And I have 2 beautiful children, to Tina and Snoopy, that I'll always be grateful for Ula with. She was a fantastic mother to Snoopy. And sons, when the marriage breaks up, always feel the Oedipal thing, and they want to take care of mom and replace dad, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But everything is just beautiful. Snoopy's married, and he's got a wonderful wife, Cora, and he's having a grandchild, his baby, my grandchild, probably in 5 months. And I'm just very happy for where all my kids' heads are right now, and if they could finally learn how to be a good daddy. And I guess Kenya's getting the benefit. My youngest, 8-year-old, is getting the benefit of all that, of all of this knowledge and all the things that the earlier kids didn't get. And they also were at 3 or 4 different stages of my life. When I was starving to death in New York with poor Jolie, you know, to a little better with Snoopy and Tina, Rashid and Kidado, you know, were Bel Air babies. And so, you know, it's hard to, that's out of your control, you know. It's But hey, that's the shots life gives you, and I have nothing to complain about. And I feel like the most blessed person ever.
When we interviewed Peggy, she said when you guys started, she had the house and the show, and she had it all going on.
That's right. That's right. In fact, I lived in her home at that time. I left home and I lived at Michael Butler's house, the guy that was the producer of Hair, and he says, "You got it all to yourself. Beautiful home up in Sunset Plaza Drive." He said, "And you don't have to share it until Mick and Jagger and Keith Richards get in town." I said, "Oh, no problem." And so they got in town, and Peggy picked me up one day, and she said, I said, "Mick and Keith are coming in." She said, "Get your bags and you're getting out of there." She was having no part of that party animal scene. And then she moved me in her home on Beverly Boulevard. And I stayed with her, and I was just beginning. My thing was just beginning then. And she was tired of the business. She was huge star. I had met her before on a trip we made with Sidney Poitier in 1968 when I was married, but didn't pay too much attention. And later on, did.
Jolie hooked you up.
And she did.
Okay, let's press on. A great story, because we just got permission again from Bruno Hamard of Radio 1 to use the Paris concert in a short snippet.
Beautiful.
And there's a beautiful story that ties into that, which is when you're sort of hustling for work at Birdland, trying to sell arrangements to Count Basie. And Basie teaches you a lesson that you've kept with you forever. Tell us that story.
I'm sorry, Quincy, just occasionally give your flash.
I'm sorry, man. Did they keep falling down?
That's good.
The power of the tempo, the right tempo. There's many words for it. In the pocket. In the pocket was the word we used all the time, because when it's in the pocket, there's nothing to discuss. Nobody's saying it's a little too fast or it's a little too slow, it's dragging. There's nothing to say. It feels just right what nature wants. Very organic nature, a natural thing. And I got my biggest lesson when we used to stand in line to pray that our arrangements would be played on Mondays at Birdland. We'd stand there with our music, and Neil Hefti, Frank Foster, Thad Jones, all these great arrangers, Ernie Wilkins, please, the best arrangers in the world. And Basie was playing Little Darling, that I think Neil had just recorded on Coral Records. And he had the tempo up a little faster like that. And he kicked it off and played it like that, and Basie said, "Let's try it like this." And he tried the slowest tempo I've ever heard in my life. Bap, 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 bam, boo-doo-doo-dee. That was like a transition. It startled me. I'm telling you, I just couldn't believe it. It was like another song. It was like another world. And big, beautiful, fat, rich harmonies that Neil wrote. You could hear everything. When it was fast, it just rushed by. And Basie just milked every part of it. And from that moment on, I was a very, very tempo-conscious person about everything. And finding the right tempo is always, I think, the real key.
Great. Because we can then lead into Henri singing. Tell us.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
So recently in Paris, tell us, just set up.
So here we are. We'd flash forward, I don't know, 40 years or something. And here we are in Paris at the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées. And I take one of the biggest chances in programming, not chances, but just different chances that I've ever done ever on the stage. And I've worked with this amazing man Henri Salvador, who at 83 years old has a #1 record album in France and Belgium. And one of the best musicians I know. He's a singer, a songwriter, guitarist, and one of the most popular comics in France. He's from Guadeloupe or Martinique. And funny, maniac, beautiful, soulful man. I've written with him and everything. And he is on the show along with Michel Legrand, who's an old friend from a long time ago. And Toots Tillman was there, Saida Garrett, Milt Grayson, and Phil Collins. And the Orchestre Nationale, the Symphony Orchestra, and David Berger's ensemble, because we're doing the Duke Ellington salute in the first half of the show. And right at the end of the show, we play all these big things with strings and everything else with Saida Garrett singing her brains out. And just before the last tune, which was Let the Good Times Roll, Henri sings Little Darling. Just beautiful. And the tempo, just as slow as that one that basically took it down to that day at Birdland. And it's like, it makes you triply celebrate just being alive.
Great. Oh, this is great. Our editor had a question. You had the aneurysm. You saw computer stuff. But everyone says you have such big ears and so on.
What?
Well, no, meaning big ears like you can hear music.
Will Smith has got big. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
What did you hear when you had the aneurysm? Did the hearing just...
That's interesting.
Did it disappear?
Yes, because, I think what happens is when you listen to music, for instance, most people, they come home to relax and listen to music. The first thing they do is lean back and they close their eyes. They shut down one sense to enhance another. I suppose that's why you do it. There was so much going on with the other senses there. Number one, the pain of an erupted aneurysm. You cannot believe what it feels like. It's like somebody got inside your head and fired a gun out the back, And that's why the coma kept coming back. I kept going in and out of a coma because the coma is to get you away from the pain. It can't take the pain anymore. And the body, the psyche does not like pain at all. And I started to feel, I just couldn't tell whether I had vertigo. I couldn't tell whether I was standing up or lying down. I didn't know what was going on. It's like a feeling I never had since I've been alive. And Peggy had called paramedics, and they said his heart's as strong as rocks, And I saw that gold and white light and tunnel, that old proverbial thing that everybody talks about. And I said, holy boy, this is it. I'm on the way out here. And then I saw that rush of all of your life, the things just going by and people. And I didn't get a chance to hear Kidada call me father. And just all these things, the people I hadn't said how much I really feel about them. And it was just crazy stuff. It's just flying by, just like holding down that part of the computer that allows it. But the computer wasn't out until 3 or 4 years later. So it was so strange for me to see a computer with that in it. And since then, a very close friend of mine is Marvin Minsky now, who's the co-founder of artificial intelligence. And that's when I realized he's replicating the human mind. And he doesn't deny that at all. He's got a great book out called Society of Mind that explains. And in London last year, I said to him, I said, Marvin, you're going for everything, aren't you? Forget hell. You're going after judgment and passion and everything else. And he is. He really is. I mean, people say your machines can't think and feel. We'll see.
How did music get you back sort of on your feet? The doctor prescribed work, didn't she?
Jesus, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Dr. Elsie Georgie, I got one operation in August, and they said the good news is you lived, 1 out of 100 lives through this, it erupted, and the bad news is you've got another one that's ready to pop in any minute. And so we have to go back in October and do it all over again. And it freaked out now. After I came out of the second one alive, I mean, I couldn't believe it, but I had amnesia, I had partial paralysis on the left side, and anemia. I had to take this medication for a long time, Dilantin. Not Dilantin, what is that? Anyway, some pill you have to take to keep your blood thin. And I forgot that I had booked, I forgot a lot, I forgot how old I was, in fact. I booked a concert tour in that following February. 15 cities in America, 15 in Japan. And I said, Elsie Georgie, who's my, guardian angel to all this, my doctor, I said, I can't do it. I can't even stand up for 5 minutes. And she said, you can, and you're going to. Even if you have to get a stool and fight your way through it and plow your way through it, or you will be a vegetable the rest of your life. And I did. We went out on the road every night, and some nights I had to sit on that stool for a long time, all through Japan, 5, 7 or 8 cities in Japan. That's when the Brothers Johnson were in my rhythm section now. And it was, she was right. And this arm is fine now.
Great. Why was roots so important to you?
Roots was important for a lot of reasons because I gave a party once, John Genet's the Blacks, that Cicely Tyson, Roscoe Lee Brown ran down at the Mark Taper, and I had a party at my home afterwards for the cast and all the friends and everything else. And I was used to party my brains out in those days, in the 60s. And there was a sweet, quiet gentleman in the corner that night, and I went to introduce myself to him. I said, did I get you a drink or anything else? I'm Quincy Jones. She said, my name is Alex Haley. And he says, and I'm working on this thing, and I'm doing this, and I'm tracing this down. I had not a clue what he was talking about, really. I mean, I felt it because I was doing the research part of it, because I was doing research myself on black music. After being in the business 25 years, I said, I want to really find out what all this means, the African connection, all of that. How much of it is African that's left in it, a lot. And the black church and a lot of hybrids. Alex, we stayed friendly, and he'd come over to the house, and he'd cook short ribs and shredded cabbage. Man, he was a great cook in the Coast Guard. And we'd hang out and just into all kinds of things. We were down to do projects together. We were working on Paradise Lost for a minute with a guy named Marty Pohl.
So it was a combination of your connection to him and the material that really...
So say it in a short way, yeah.
Yeah, no.
And so... then his thing was building up, and he was formulating, the book was formulating. He asked me to go to a couple of the readings and so forth, and by this time he'd asked me also to get involved in a miniseries that David Walper was doing. And then I started to see what had happened, and how he took two words, ko for kora, which is an instrument from West Africa, and gambi, which is a river, and took those words to trace his roots all the way back to his family in West Africa. And it was awesome. And a lot of my research, felt like it was parallel to that situation. So it almost was like another divine move that they would ask me, and Walper would ask me to be involved in Roots. And so we did, I did the first episode because I really struggled with it, because it was so important to me that if a culture is stolen or strayed or lost, that you have to establish that culture. And that they were not interested in me going that way. And I couldn't handle it. I really fell in. I could not discipline myself enough to just focus on getting the job done. I really couldn't, because it was very, very personal. And I wanted to have African music in there and so forth. And at that time, nobody knew what it was going to be. You can't guess those things. People can look back and say, oh, yeah, I know. That's not true. If they knew, the networks closed it down the night before Sweet Week. Please, they put all 8 nights together, and after that Sunday, the next night was the start of Sweet Week. Give me a break, If they knew what it was, that's what you dream about for a Sweet Week. This was the biggest thing since the Super Bowl that they ever had on television at the time. Anyway, we all get lost sometimes.
That's great. This show's on in Sweet Week. I interviewed Ms. Shabazz, and I now call Mr. Jones, Mr. McWilliams. I'm now very formal with my friends. I like that.
I do too, and that's its dignity. It's beautiful.
It is. Okay. A heavy-duty area that we didn't really we placed you in Chicago. You talked about your mother there, but what I think nobody really knows that she lived a long time. It wasn't like just in your childhood your mother, is taken away from you and you miss a mother. There's that, she keeps showing up in your life. And I guess I just like, again, in the broadest sense, throughout your life, if you could speak to what your mother, a moment when she shows up, which you just can't believe she's messing with your life or what have you. And then if you'd speak to when your mother finally passed away, was it a loss? Was it a release? What did it mean to you?
Well, when I think about my brother and I, Lloyd, and my mother, it's still a big gray area because she didn't know how to be a mother, and we certainly didn't know how to be children or her children. And so I guess from the very beginning it was established. Unfortunately, people all told us from a very early age, when your mother gets out of the mental hospital, she's going to kill you. Everybody said that. And some, that's ghetto sense of humor, But we took it very seriously. And when she'd see us, she escaped one time, and we saw her running towards us, and we thought we were going to die. You really did. And so that gets very deep in your subconscious mind and your psyche, that fear. So every time you move in closer to try to change that, try to find out is there a more peaceful, safe place with her, she would attack again. And it was like to stop. We just could never communicate. Never. I mean, never. On the phone, I'd try everything I knew to try to keep a conversation that would go on and keep a nice, positive flow going. We couldn't go. We could not get there. And Lloyd, and eventually was the same way as me. At one point, he'd have to hang up, and that's something that's not a part of my nature, to hang up on somebody. I think it's the worst thing that can happen. But I don't know, and I'm sure there are a lot of things and answers that are unresolved inside, because everybody wants to and needs to be not loved but adored by your mother. I don't have a clue what the word means, and I tell my girlfriend all the time, there's two kinds of people here: the people that were nourished and nurtured and validated by two caring human beings, a male and a female, not necessarily mother and father, and were valued and guided by these people. That's one kind of person. The other ones that didn't have that, and like John Bradshaw in Homecoming, in his Homecoming book, and the reclaiming and nurturing the inner child, cherishing the inner child, says before the age of 9 years old, you need these two people as caretakers from 9 to 18 months to validate, guide, love, all that, identify, and that will help you be a whole human being. If you don't have that, you spend the rest of your life trying to fill up that hole, to figure it all out. And it's true, and that's the other kind of person. And I, now, because of Lisette, she is so totally that loved person, from 7 brothers and sisters, and mother and father, they're just the most giving and nurturing people I've ever seen in my life. It's such a huge difference. And, they don't know how to even communicate with each other. That's what I'm realizing now. You have a good background?
Yeah.
But you don't know what I'm talking about. You don't have a clue, It's hard for you, and why should you be able to relate what it feels like not to have that? Like, I can't relate to what it must feel like as to looking forward to going home every day and saying, there's a mother that really cares about me, everything else I'm thinking about. She's going to be proud of me today. Oh, God, I hope she's not too angry that I did this or whatever. All the mother things that it's about. So when I talked to Dr. Dean Ornish, who I asked to come and help me with my brother Lloyd, I said, how did this happen to him? That he took all of this disease inside of his body and mind and accepted and everything. How did it happen? He said, he told Lloyd the first thing, he said, you can never see your mother again. Never. And Elvira, forget it, he wouldn't want to see that anyway. But he said, you can never see her again. And I didn't understand that, I went the other way. I went into this other world. I literally created my own world, because it was a survival tactic. I had no choice. And so I'm not saying I'm any better off or worse off or anything else. You do the thing you have to do to make it, man. That's all anybody knows how to do. You have to do what you have to do. And I can't, it's like driving a car. I guess it's probably, I don't know how to drive a car. I guess it must be a great feeling. You get an attitude and slam the door and go outside and boom, and rev off, and drive around and cool off or something like that. I'll never know. Never done it. And it's the same with this thing. I'll never know what that feeling is now, And my mother she outlived Lloyd. It's amazing. Brilliant lady. I mean, absolutely brilliant. But I have letters just by tons. For Christmas sometimes she'd type the whole New Testament. 100 words a minute, 12 languages, write and speak it. Amazing woman. She went to Boston University in the 20s, and she had dementia praecox, and they say it has been said at that time that she could have been cured with vitamin B. Who knows, we'll never know because she never got cured. And we'll probably be trying to work it out till the day we leave the planet, just what the hell to do. But in the meantime, you have to do what you can.
Thank you.
Washington. And I was surprised. I think it was right after he saw you.
Yeah, day after.
Yeah. And he called. He didn't mention he did your thing. He didn't even mention it.
Wow.
So I haven't had a chance to thank him. And he told me about the book. He was talking about that. He said, it looks like my own life, man, and blah, 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 blah. And it's wonderful. And this I can skip around if I want to. And just going to have a block party on the 30th. But this man, his awareness level, I know he's a Rhodes Scholar, but he astounds me because, he's got a million things on his mind. He's traveling all over the world dealing with all these issues and has been for a long time. And
just speak to how they're rolling now. Speak to how you and he connect. Clearly the one parent kind of background and
okay, it's
the
a good
inclusive nature of what he was interested
right.
in.
Good example. After a long time, they asked us to stay at Lincoln's bedroom. The first night, January 1st, 2000, the first night of the next 1,000 years. And that night, he was playing cards with some friends and so forth. My son was there, Snoopy, and his girlfriend, and Lisette. And we were upstairs in the solarium. And he came downstairs, and he showed us these pictures on the wall. I said, what is that? He said, that's his first house he lived in. It looked as ragged as our house, It was as ghetto as our house was. But since the first day I've met him, and Hillary, and Chelsea, it's been like somebody I've known all my life, and was raised with. Because there's just a very comfortable way of communicating. And it's not just about politics anyway, it's about humanity. And he's aware. I saw him do things at CAA giving a speech, about what content should be to all the filmmakers, etc. He had a speech this big. He looked up in the balcony, saw Fred Wertheimer from Westheimer from William Morris, and John Singleton standing together. And he looked up and he tore his speech, just put it under the thing, and jammed the whole rest of the speech because he recognized John Singleton. I can't remember, think of one other president who would recognize John Singleton from sight. I'm serious, and I've known a lot of presidents there. But his awareness of the street, I've always felt very comfortable knowing there's a president in the White House that understands the street, because just say no to drugs ain't gonna get it, man. that's childish, and we've had that. But he knows what's going on, and the bonding has always been so comfortable. It's inclusive and lets you express yourself and any thoughts, and he can go anywhere. And one example was, I said, I saw a card, my friend Clark Terry said, I saw a beautiful postcard the other day he sent me with a picture of you on June 18th of the Jazz Appreciation thing. He said, yeah, it's a shame that Joe Henderson passed. Joe Henderson was the saxophone player right next to them, very special jazz musician, that he was aware that he was on that postcard and that he had passed, And I don't know any presidents that would be that aware of our culture. And I mean, these are very mild, simplistic kind of examples. But we go anywhere we go. With if we're talking about Nelson Mandela, if you're talking about legalization of drugs or whatever, he will give his point of view and so forth. And it's just, I love me some Bubba. I love Bill, I love Hillary, and I love Chelsea. And they're just incredible people.
Set up, if you would. I think the section we're going to use is how you take I Have a Dream, Martin Luther King, followed by LL Cool J. And Bill Clinton gets that. Just explain your thinking in building a program that way and how Bill Clinton can speak to the inclusive nature of rap in our culture. Again, very quickly.
Well, okay, I was very pleased when Bill mentioned how he dug the correlation between Dr. King, protests of the 50s, and LL Cool, protests of the 90s. because had them on the inauguration. I had the clip of Dr. King doing "I Have a Dream" with the LL. That's what it was all about. I got a lot of resistance in the beginning. You can't have a rapper follow Dr. King, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same cloth. And I was just so pleased that not the president understood it, but 500,000 other people did. They jumped to their feet when he hit that stage. I'm telling you, they leaped off the ground when LL came out after Dr. King. And it fit like so organically, it was like a glove.
Great. Why are you so connected, this is a big question, to South Africa and Nelson Mandela? That started with Roots? Was that before that? I mean,
I started in 1970. I don't know why. I didn't, at that time, I could barely put names to the things. I could feel it. I had a sense of awareness about it. And I did an album called Gula Matari, which is supposed to be on Stanley Livingston's grave. It means breaker of rocks. And I knew it was a South African term. I never, ever explained what it was about. It was about the times of peace and times of struggle, back to times of peace. That was what was a metaphor for that. It was a long piece that I wrote. Never told anybody. I never wrote about it or spoke about it. And ironically, 3 years ago, when we went over to be with him on the Blue Train, we would meet people in each village as we went through. But this night, everybody had gone to bed, and we hear this rumble outside about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I told Lizette I'm going to go check it out. There were thousands of people out there, and they were just rumbling the train. They were probably sorry they missed us when we were there earlier. And they all had the pictures of the cover of Gula Matari pressed up against the train. And the guys in prison, a lot of the people were in prison, students and everything else, all knew what it was about. They said they used it as a fight metaphor, spiritual fight metaphor during the struggle. It's just the most amazing thing. So it eventually, the friendship, we got closer and closer and closer, and we were invited over. When he was freed, we became close. We helped raise some money for him, and it just eventually evolved into almost a brother-like relationship. I think he's one of the greatest human beings that world leaders have ever witnessed before. Because he's
just give me his name, if you would, in that same sentence.
Madiba.
No, but
Nelson Mandela is the tallest standing leader I've ever come in contact with. And I've seen him under many different circumstances. The day I was part of the American delegation, the day of his inauguration, went over with Hillary and the Gores and Colin Powell, etc., and witnessed that, Maya Angelou, and witnessed that incredible day of where he had de Klerk as the deputy president. He had put Boudelese right down front in a position of dignity. He took Winning and put her on the stage. And everybody, Gaddafi and Arafat, Castro, everybody's there. All the world leaders are there. And he did this without bloodshed, because it would have been very easy with what they went through. I've also witnessed the TRC committee with Archbishop Tutu, of the amnesty that they give and the turn the other cheek. The attitude they have is amazing, but it is so progressive and beyond. I don't know many countries that could deal with that kind of discipline, to be that fair. Because Mandela's always told me my problem in South Africa has never been about races and colors. It's always been about a system that he would fight to. Because let's get real now, Nelson Mandela and his people in Tambo, they were trained. They went up and trained in Algeria. They knew what guerrilla warfare and everything was about. It's not like there's some, naive people. He knew exactly what was going on all sides, and he made the choice and decision to let his people live and let the country not have bloodshed.
thank you. Miles at Montreux. Bubba talked about seeing the tape and being moved by it. Gerald Early speaks about it. David Baker and John, everyone says Miles, time and time again, had sworn never to play the old stuff.
Right.
And you asked him to. Why did you ask him to?
I asked Miles to play because, number one, since I think I could even hold my horn properly, I wanted to and tried to play like Miles Davis. Dizzy was too hard to imitate, and Miles was so cool, and he changed the sound of the trumpet. He's the Picasso of jazz. He really is. He went through just like the blue and the cubism and primitive and everything else. So Miles did exactly the same thing and not followed it. He led it. He led all the movements he went through. And I finally got to meet him in 1951. I was standing in the Downbeat Club in New York, scared to death and wide-eyed Seattle green turkey, and listened to Mingus. And behind me, I said, I heard some sucker on the Lionel Hampton record trying to sound like me. I said, oh, my God. And behind me was Miles. And he wanted to let me know that it was his way of saying hello in a way, you know. And we were friends until he left, you know. Just, it's incredible. His paintings, for instance. He used to send paintings over to the house by the dozens, you know, all the time. And just Vernon, his nephew, would bring them over. And I said, Miles, look, you know, I'm going to pay properly for these things, and talk to Steve Ross and Courtney Ross about buying some of his paintings. Lionel bought some of the paintings. Everybody's buying his paintings because he was beautiful. And I said, but you sign a painting, man. Picasso signs a painting. Come on. You know, man, everybody knows that's my... I said, yeah, but please sign it, man. Please, like everybody else has been doing for 3,000 years. And he said, it's okay. And I sent him back out there, and he signed all four corners. You couldn't tell which way the painting was supposed to be up. I loved him to pieces, you know, everything about it. He was the biggest bark in the world, a lot of lightning and thunder, but no rain. I mean, in terms of his attitude, his persona, he was sweet and sensitive. He really was, you know. And I know that side of him very well. And I know I'll never forget the feeling with two guys that had that same image. And one of their first words of kindness to me, we came back from Hawaii, and I got locked in the Dean Martin's dressing room over the weekend, and Sinatra showed up early that morning. Q, how you like your eggs? And Miles, I had pleurisy once at the Chateau Marmont, and Miles and all this stuff. How you like your eggs? And I'll never forget that. I mean, the two guys that are supposed to be these, you know, real macho dudes, you know. That I know that sounds silly, you know, but it's almost like I love you, you know. It feels like I love you the way they did it, because it was with such hesitance, you know, but vulnerability was there.
Did you feel like this was, you know, the end of the road? Speak about that specific Montreux concert. Was this the end of the road? Could you tell this was it, the swan song? And
Miles?
Yeah.
We did not have a clue. What happened is we had two bands show up. George Grunn's band, Claude graciously asked me to be a part of that production at festival, which was really an honor. And George Grunn's band showed up, and so did Anita Evans, Gil Evans' wife. They're both there. I mean, big bands, you know. And I always, when Gil was alive, we used to talk about how the brass sometimes would blow the woodwinds clusters away in person. I said, no. They said, pick one. I said, let's use both of them. So it's like 10 French horns, 4 oboes, 2 English horns, and 6 or 10 trumpets. It was amazing. I asked them to just play soft with no vibrato, and it came off like a huge, beautiful purple and black velvet tapestry background, and an incredibly beautiful white and black pearl in the middle. Miles sitting there courageously, unapologetically battling his 25-year-old brilliance, you know, at 65. Nobody had any idea he was that ill. Nobody at all. I was so shocked I couldn't believe it. But I got to tell you, that night, after all the kicking and screaming and moaning and whining and everything else, he heard that sound, and Wally Roney was there, and I saw him actually smile at the audience and wave a towel. I said, what? He looked at me and said, he said a bad word to me. And he said, let's take it all over the world, man. I mean, he was so happy. I mean, that was the reward right there was that he was happy, you know, and I wasn't like under protest. I mean, he heard it because, you know, he got it, man. He really did. And it was like in the rehearsals, he had Wallace Roney played most of his parts because He didn't remember the solos, so they had them written out. Gil Goldstein brought the solos written out, and Miles let Ronnie do it in the rehearsal. And when we got to the date, I got it. He went for it and didn't flinch an inch.
Great. What's going on with Bono and the Pope? What were you guys doing there? You know, speak to that. And did Bono give the Pope some shades to wear?
That's a good question. What are two raggedy Irish rock and rollers and a bebop brother from Chicago sitting up there in Castel Gandolfo, which is the Summer Vatican, talking to the Pope about relieving third world debt for the HIPC countries? I mean, I asked myself that when we were there. I said, "What are we doing?" You know, I mean, it was, but it's amazing because we went to see Robert Rubin at first. You know, I got my doctorate from NYU with him, and so we went to see Robert Rubin and Jim Wolfenson, and you know, Bono saw Larry Summer. I mean, really getting inside of this, and so they presented the mission statement. Bono gave him some dark shades, and the Pope put them on. He really did. He put the shades on, and he had them on sideways like this, and the other people around there, they didn't want them to take pictures of that because the Pope was really so down to earth, you know, it was just beautiful. Then he read his reaction to the mission statement, supporting it, the notion of relieving the third world debt, and 2 days later, that was on a Thursday, I think, in 1999 in September, and 2.5 days later, I read in the Herald Tribune that $27.5 billion debt relief had been applied to Bolivia, the Ivory Coast, and Mozambique. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. It was just incredible. He had some cool shoes on too. I didn't believe that either because I looked down and I saw all these other dudes with the industrial, you know, Vatican shoes on, the black ones. You know, he had on some Burgundy wing-tip Mackin shoes, man, with tan socks on. I couldn't believe it. And I know his feet were hurting, you know, but he was cool. Beautiful presence, you know, just incredible presence.
Why do you think you're so... What explains your involvement with these different politicians and you know, the last interview I started with this quote from your book. My entire career, my entire life has been based on trying to break down the walls between people of all colors throughout the world. And in a way, all of a sudden it dawned on me that that's why you're hooking up with these politicians. But I sort of want to throw the question to you, which is, you know, since the Listen Up movie was made in '91, a good portion of your time and energy goes into dealing with world leaders. And the question is, what explains that? Why at this point in your life are you trying to connect with those guys?
Well, the good portion of my energy is not so much about world leaders, it's about world issues. I think you're gonna get more done when you deal with somebody that knows where all the locks are and the closets and all the skeletons are buried and know the inner workings of something, you know. In the old days, we used to go out in Elk Corners and Thursday nights at a high school in Houston, Texas, and all that stuff in a Baptist church. You can't do that today. I mean, I'm too old for that anyway. And you need to find things that have a much bigger throw and try to get it done another way, because we learned a certain thing with the We Are the World thing. Everybody did. Lionel and Cragen and everybody about Belafonte, about what that's about. And we didn't realize the pitfalls in that. There's one thing to raise the money and then to get the food. We couldn't even get airlifts to get the food over there to Ethiopia. Please, when it got there, they have a problem, so internal problems with each other. They put $1 million worth of food in the desert, says if they want to let it come and get there, and it spoils, you know. It's amazing what the difficulties that were involved in trying to understand the politics. Or you've got charity organizations asking for money that spend 40% of it on overhead. We had a very powerful board of directors that really wanted to defend our names, you know, and wanted to get the most mileage out of it. And you learn, as Bono knows. I mean, if you're smart, you're not going to go to some guy out in the street, throwing gas bombs at the embassy to try to get something done because he's trying to blow his way through. You have to talk to somebody that understands the whole thing. All politicians I can't deal with because I don't feel any kinship with all politicians. I mean, I usually end up working with people that I feel their souls, and they share their soul with me. I mean, that's the way we are as animals. I don't ever want to be in anything political or deal with politics. But if you're trying to talk to a country, I mean, it sure is easy to get something done in South Africa if you're talking to Adelaide Tambo or Nelson Mandela or Mbeki, to get it done, rather than somebody hanging out in the street. Like Mandela led me straight to the Minister of Education, or Mbeki sent me to his economic advisor, Makulu. And I think that works that way all around the town. And the only thing I think that's valuable about having recognition as an artist, and that respect or that whatever that is, and that celebrity, is to use that to try to do something that's useful. I mean, otherwise, we're kidding. We're naive and kidding ourselves, And I like it because it's an effective way to get something major done. I think America should have a minister of culture. I really do. Not just to talk to Tipper Gore and Al Gore about that all the time, and the Clintons too. And maybe one day we will. We should. Of all people in the world, we should have it. That's our soul. Our music is this country's soul. Whether they understand it or not, it's still its soul. We thrive off of it. And I don't know. Everybody does what they know how to do,
You'd be a great man. I keep looking for the perfect title for this documentary. Minister of Culture, maybe.
Oh, no. And I put that in. John Kennedy Jr. asked me he did a book called 250 Ways to Make a Better America. And we had a nice relationship. He got George magazine. He was happy to come and tell me, I got my own now, too, after Vibe. And I've known them in Carolina as when they were very young. And they're fantastic people. But I had that in everybody had the little contribution of how to make it a better America. And one of the first things I said in there was that we have to pay our teachers properly. We trust our whole future and all our youth, with teachers that just get dogged around verbally and physically and economically. It's insane.
I just want to cover a couple other things, and then I think we're in good shape. One area we didn't touch on in the last interview. Again, just in a nutshell. After Color Purple, you melt down and have like an out-of-body experience.
That's right.
Just briefly take us there to a place where you need to get your together.
It's real simple. It's was the best of times, as Dickens said, and the worst of times. We just finished Thriller. We had just finished We of the World. I wanted to go and take that opportunity to go into another territory, with the most qualified people in the world. I say with Steven Spielberg and Kathy Kennedy, et cetera, and Frank Marshall. And I did. And it was like going to USC for 10 years, being there. I wouldn't trade that for anything. I didn't even listen to radio for 2 years. And when we finished, I was so busy trying to figure out what happens with the script, to this, the costumes, the process of filmmaking, learning from the best people on the planet, that I forgot. Oh my God! When we finished, we left. We had a wrap party, and we left North Carolina. We got home, and I said, "Great! Now we got a score." I said, "Score! My God, are you kidding?" I mean, I'd never even thought about it, during that period because we were rushing and working very hard. And I couldn't sleep. We had a schedule of about 6 weeks, and I couldn't sleep. And so Dr. Georgie said, I'll send you something to help you sleep. And unfortunately, it was Halcyon. Now, Halcyon, I discovered 10 months later, is a dream deprivant. They used it during the Korean War to interrogate prisoners, And it's dream deprivant, and it knocks you straight out to sleep, but there's no dreams. And so I didn't know that was a danger. and it can lead to schizophrenia. Very dangerous results, you know. And to make a long story short, Dr. Larry Norton came to me one day from Sloan Kettering and said, "You're in trouble." And I'd just done a T.J. Martell, I was an honoree, and we raised $4 million. And he says, "I came out here to tell you you're in big trouble, and you better stop now, or it could be fatal." And I couldn't go right away. So I went to a place called Two Bunch Palms to get a little rest before I left for. Finally, Brando let me have his place in Tahiti and Tetiaroa. And I went over there, and I didn't realize how sick I was, and restless, no food, anhedonia, there's no joy, just everything. It was just shutting down. And he's that time, Larry Norton says I had adrenal syndrome, which all the organs start to shut down, and you get restlessness and irritability, and almost self-destruction is the end result of that. And this experience in Tahiti was, he said, go someplace where there's all nature and don't put a time on it, a deadline on it. And that's what I did. And when I came back, I was still sick, and I couldn't face crowds. I couldn't look people in the eye. And a beautiful French painter said to me, named Bahia, said, "Let's make love." I said, "I can't. Those words never came out of my mouth before." Trust me. And she said, "Your Kundalini's gone." I knew what Kundalini was, you know, it's a sexual energy from back here all up. And then it started to feel like my soul was literally outside of my body. I couldn't look in the window. I couldn't look in the mirror. You know, my eyes just scared me to look at it, you know. And whatever happened there, it went out, and I finally got back to Los Angeles, and I called Dr. Norton, and I said, "I need to find a sanitarium. It's over. It's Gauguin time, right? Something." I couldn't write my name. And he says, "What have you been doing?" I said, "I've been taking calcium." He said, "What? Are you crazy?" And he says, "I've got to get you on Valium for 60 days. You need 2 dreams and you'll be okay." I thought I was losing my mind. And he said, "I got to get you on Valium for 60 days and you'll be fine. After 2 days of dreaming, you'll be on the way." I was so happy. In 2 days, I just took a little bit of Valium. I was straight in 2 days. All the feeling came back into my body and everything. It was just like a rebirth, you know. It was incredible, man. And it all came back, and I started to cry. I couldn't do that during that time. And he said, "You will never be crazy, and once this happens, you'll be fine." And there it was, a 2-year, very slow path back to normality. And made it.
Then you're back on the block.
Back on the block.
Okay, I'm just going to triple check my questions. Bill Clinton, Color Purple, Tahiti, Miles, Mandela, Bono. Let's just talk about what we were doing yesterday. What's the hardest part about pulling together a box set of your life's work? I mean, you were cutting stuff out. Why are you cutting portions of songs? What is it about putting together that box set that's hard?
Well, number one, you're dealing with a body of work. And so you can't be as generous with time. The biggest restriction is you don't get 70 minutes on each CD. That's really what that's about. So you've got to decide where you want to use that room. You know, do you want to stay in a vamp of one song that's 6 minutes long and play it 20 times, you know, or do you want to give more of a song that has more shape to it and more structure to it? So it's architecture. It's simple as that, architecture and sonic balance. You know, you're trying to get that. And also presentation, because we started the first part off, which is called Jumping in the Woodshed, which is the very beginning from Kingfish on, first solo, first arrangements, etc. And 51, right straight down in chronological order, so you can see it from the very beginning. But after that, you can't, side 2, you can't do chronological because it's not an entertaining, a pleasant presentation, I don't think. So getting it right, man, it's always trying to figure out how to get it so it feels good. If it doesn't feel good, that's it. You know, that's all you can do is listen to it, you know, and groove with it and get inspired by it. So you have to listen again to the little whisper inside.
How come the dude isn't on there? Just didn't happen. What about the book? What has made the book so hard to do?
I guess the difficulty in doing a book is number one, it's something you're not used to doing at all. I mean, it's a big form. It's not like a pop song. It's like it's a concerto or symphony, really. It's a symphony of your life, and you in the selection, it's just unbelievable. The choices, it's constant, hundreds of thousands of choices, and how they interrelate with each other. Emotions that you don't understand, that you have to go back and visit and are trying to avoid. All kinds of things, And really, it's the first time I ever looked back. That's the main thing. I never looked back before, ever. And you said, Jesus, Lord. Now it's time to go back to March 14th, 1933, and go all the way to whatever it is today, July 2001. And that's serious. I mean, it is crazy, and you have to visit all the skeletons and all the good times and all the ladies and all of the bad times, everything, It's, please. It's a very special place between joy and pain, It's cathartic, too, very cathartic, because at least to understand will help you, But I had to go up a lot of things you can't remember, senior moments all day long, What was that name? Where was this, And your friends start to talk about things, and, it's a process. The first 2 years is just like kind of keep from getting vertigo because it's so much, And
After that's out, after the book's out and the CD, are you going to breathe this big sigh of relief and go to the beach, or what are you going to do? I don't think so.
After what?
After the book and the CD, and come this fall, what's
fall, man. The fall's when it all gets crazy. That's when all the major picnic stretching starts. Are you kidding? I looked at October. It's every day, It's 12, 13, 14 different cities, and each city is getting ready to party. I can feel it. I can feel it in Philadelphia already, which was booked before we even knew. They've got the, Philadelphia Philharmonic, and Stevie's going to be there. And I mean, it's just that. So each city's going to be waiting there to wear you out. And you go to the next city, and they're going to wear you out there. I go to Chicago, and my little baby sister, my sweet baby sister, Oprah, is doing the show. And that night, my other little baby sister, Linda Rice Johnson, is giving a party from Johnson Publications. And it's just that. And don't even talk about Toronto. It's 4 days of 4 different events, So whatever, I'm just going to relax and roll with it and smell the roses and do whatever I have to do and groove with it. And I'll find a hole. I know, believe me, I have never had any problem letting go and partying my brains out and relaxing my brains. I don't have a problem with that. Never did, never will. And I play as hard as I work. I promise you. Maybe that's the problem.
But when that's all done, whenever that is, say New Year, you got I know you got 12 things going.
But we're gonna go. We're gonna kick back and relax and don't want to be with my family and just hang out with my kids. And wait a minute, it's Snoopy's baby may be here. Wow. Yeah, the baby's 5 months now. When is that?
That's January.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, again, we're going to leave some room for God to walk through the room. And God's going to say, sit down, sucker, and groove with this and enjoy life, period.
2 super quick things. You mentioned teaching Betty Davis to sing in a movie. What was that movie, and what was that song?
Betty Davis wasn't a movie.
Sorry, Michael. Quick adjustment.
You said Betty Davis needed to sing a song or something. You were teaching her.
Right. When I was with Mercury, Betty Davis had to sing, I think it was Married I Can Always Get. It was a song from a show. We recorded her as a singer. It wasn't for a movie at all. And she was nervous. And I was not so much nervous as intimidated by telling her anything what to do. But she says, I'm not acting now. And then even in acting, I'm used to directors telling me and screaming at me. She had 4 packs of cigarettes. And she says, I need you to yell at me. I said, well, I can handle that. No problem. I work with a lot of girl singers, and I can do that. And we became friends. And she finished the song. And every night we used to go to the Bel Air Hotel, because she lived at 1100 Bel Air Stone Canyon, and we'd have a couple of tastes, and that's why I wanted to live on that street, because she showed me the street. It was a really beautiful street on Stone Canyon, and I did what yelling I had to do, and we finished the date. And she was just like, that's when you realize she's not some out of space human being. She's a human being that's scuffling too. She's trying to do something she hadn't done before, which is sing.
Great. Let me just quickly check my questions, and I think we're done. The editor gave me a bunch of things. I ask this of everybody else. I thought I'd ask it of you, because I ask everyone else to define you. Who is Quincy Jones?
I don't know what that means.
What do you think of yourself as, I'm sure on tax returns it might say composer. I don't know what it says, business person, but do you have an image of yourself as if people say to me, who am I? Oh, I'm a documentary filmmaker. I got a family. I don't know. Can you say that?
I don't know. I am whatever I am doing at that time. That's why I always like to explore and go to that new place and that new adventure to try to find out. Because I figure I don't ever want to finish. I think if you finish, that's when you give up. And I talked to a lot of conductors and so forth. That's why they live such a long time, is because they never get finished, and they live 98 years old. Or creative people for the most part live a long time, or should, if they don't indulge too much. But I don't know. I think that once you develop a core skill, and I consider my core skill as arranging and orchestrating, composing. I mean, that's what I really put all my time into in the beginning, and I found a way to find a correlation between that and television production, or movies, or magazine, whatever else it is, you do. That's what I see a lot of correlation in structure and presentation in the book, after a while it's the same thing. If you have all the trumpets play high for 10 minutes, it's going to sound like doo-doo, And it's the same way if you have, in a movie, if you have everybody slapping each other, for 5 reels, it's about architecture and pacing and anticlimax and not having anticlimaxes and establishing the locale, identifying enemies and allies. I mean, it's story structure. They're talking about story structure. All of those things, somehow they have a common denominator, I feel inside, And I also feel that I enjoy following my bliss and my vision. I trust my vision a lot, and I sometimes with a lot of negative, non-believing people around us saying that's not going to work, that can't happen. I don't even think that doesn't mean a thing to me, because that just makes me recharge and keep going. And I just love to dream. I love to execute it. I love to be there and try to make some difference in being on this planet, And I feel very, very like a very lucky person that I'm able to do all of that and still have the great friends and great children, and that's all these little pieces of what make all this stuff worthwhile. I mean, it's like they say, this is what is evidence of you being in your skin. And most of the time I say, I don't want to waste my time sleeping. Because you're going to get a lot of sleep when you get out of here, And Frank Sinatra's line, he said, live every day like it's your last, and one day you'll be right.
One quote or favorite expression of yours I really want to get in this documentary is, when you stand up in front of a band, you have a favorite expression, which uses the word Dracula. Would you put that in a sentence for me?
Every time since I've been 11 years old or 12 years old, and I drop my hand on music that you have been struggling with 2 or 3 days to arrange, I feel like Dracula at the blood bank.
Had to get that in. That's my favorite. That's my favorite expression. I learned in the book your favorite expression, I think, is serial black belt. Because you can be
Serial black
belt,
hardcore,
one thing or another.
hardcore. Yeah, that's
different
true.
Ways.
Always exaggerating, you know.
No, somebody's a serial black belt. Well, that's great. I think we got it covered left, right, and center. And
well, I got to tell you, Michael, I've done a lot of interviews and everything else, you know, but I don't think anybody does it better than you, ever, man. I really mean that from the bottom of my heart, man.
I thank you.
You are serial, hardcore, black belt, industrial thoroughbred.
Well, I just hope
It's true.
I hope you say the same thing November 19th.
No, I will. I already know.
We got our work cut out in the next couple months, but you're quite an inspiration that way.
Thank you. Let's just right back at you.
Same way that the people say, you know, all the musicians say, somehow he brings out something, you know, I think, can't put my finger on it, but, well, let's let Mr. Jones get a breath of fresh air, and we're going to set up for Lizette, because I definitely want to get her...
Put her booty to work.
We'll just...
Yeah, you can probably do it. I'm glad I got to hear it because I can tell where he's.
Yeah, oh, it's amazing, Michael.
And room tone.